Welcome all. It's my pleasure to welcome today Tigran Sloyan, the CEO and co-founder of tech company Codesignal. So Tigran, thank you very much for your time. Welcome to Armenia.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. It's been fun.
So 9 months ago, we had another interview and Codesignal had been spotlighted in Forbes magazine. It received $50 million in investments.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit about future plans, what has happened since then, and what you guys are planning for going into the future?
Absolutely. I actually remember you asked me kind of what's the plan, and I said we're going to triple the team in the next couple of months, and we did. So happy to report that the team has been growing significantly in Armenia and globally in general. And the plan is to keep expanding, but not just the size of the team, but overall the business. I think we have a unique opportunity to really create something great here, something lasting, something that we can go back to our grandchildren and be like, hey, we made a difference in the world. So lots to do, but I'm a firm believer that, if you have a great team and if you got a great group of people that are working towards something with passion, with ambition, usually great things come. So
I also want to get to understand some of the challenges, though, in the Armenian context, because obviously Codesignal is doing great as a company, but Armenia's IT sector still faces certain challenges, which I'm sure the Codesignal team has confronted. One of them is the issue of education. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, what's it like hiring in Armenia? And I know Codesignal has a lot of experience in this figure, especially perhaps not the junior positions, but more higher up positions. Is it easy to find people for those positions? And if there are any challenges, what are some ways we could confront these challenges?
Absolutely. I think, on the one hand, there is a lot of talent in Armenia, right? Especially given the population. Anybody that finds out there's like barely 3 million people is like, wow, and you guys have managed to build a really amazing team there. And I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of great talent. But at the same time, it's never easy to find and hire great people. Great people are hard to come by. It takes a lot of practice and skill and dedication to build to the level of skill where you can actually be helpful and drive a technology company forward. We've been lucky to build a team that, every day I'm like, wow, you guys are awesome. We're so lucky to have you in this team working with us. But at the same time, there is a lack of supply, especially these days where there are a lot of technology companies that are opening offices, both companies that have been started here, companies that are expanding internationally, or are opening subsidiaries in Armenia, and the competition is heating up like crazy. And I think it's to the country's advantage to start thinking about how can we increase this supply, right? Because it's a massive driving force of economic progress, because all of these technology companies are becoming very significant taxpayers. And technology is one of those things that you can export internationally with no limits, right? It's usually not bound to the local market, which is amazing, because you can be sitting in Armenia creating a product and selling it in Hong Kong, and it's very difficult to do with physical goods. So as such, it presents a massive opportunity for economic progress. But that progress starts from, is there enough supply of that tech talent to create those products, to create that future that can drive that economic progress?
And you speak about tech talent. One of the phenomenons that took place since our last interview was the influx of Russians, Ukrainians, and Belarusians because of the invasion of Ukraine. A lot of them are young professionals that have come out of tech companies in Moscow and St. Petersburg. And there's almost two perceptions of it. One, there are those that say that they may take opportunities from local talent. Mm-hmm. There are others that are saying this will enrich the local talent, exchange ideas, thoughts. Do you think it's an opportunity, or do you think it's something that is problematic?
I 100% think it's an opportunity. And it's funny that the same dialogue happens in the United States. In the United States is a country created by immigrants. And yet you see a lot of politicians and a lot of people saying like, oh, let's not let more immigrants into the country because they're going to take jobs from Americans. And it's a very weak argument, because anytime you look at the data, you see that most of these immigrants have created far more jobs, have created far more economic opportunity. Some of the best companies and some of the top tier executives of these companies are immigrants in the United States. And I think especially when it comes to high-skilled immigrants, right? I think it's different when you say, hey, we're just going to have everybody with no money, no skills, nothing, come and depend on social welfare here. That's obviously, it's a different argument, but highly skilled immigrants are usually the best thing that can happen to the economy. Because yes, maybe somewhere in there, they will take a job from some local, but net, they drive opportunity, right? They start new things, they bring more investments into the country. If anything, they bring an extra energy, right? Because a lot of the times, immigrants who have left their homes have, I want to say, more drive to succeed. They have something to prove, and usually they're far away from home, so they tend to be more ambitious, more driven to achieve something. And it changes the momentum, right? It raises the bar for the locals of what do we have to do to be successful? And I 100% think it's an amazing opportunity for the country.
And I want to continue to discuss education and the workforce, but another question I'm interested in asking is that Armenia has been coined the Silicon Valley of the Caucasus, and you work in the actual Silicon Valley. I'm wondering why Armenia, or why outside Silicon Valley? If Silicon Valley is that valuable and such a hub of tech expertise, why would any company seek to move out of it? Is Silicon Valley still Silicon Valley?
It's a great question. I think Silicon Valley is still Silicon Valley in many ways, because what makes Silicon Valley is people. Right? I keep going back to this idea. It's not like, if you took out all these people from these top tier companies that make up Silicon Valley will cease to exist, really, right? It's that talent, it's the environment that drives what we call Silicon Valley, what we know as Silicon Valley. And I think if Armenia will eventually get recognized globally as the Silicon Valley of this region, as we said, you have to focus on talent, because great humans create great things. Great things attract more great humans. And it's this magical cycle effect where more innovation drives more interest drives more innovation, and the cycle continues to get to the point where in San Francisco these days, every block has like top tier well-funded company. Every other block has a top tier investor, but that didn't happen overnight. That was a cycle of, as we all know, started in, when Stanford and HP and Google and some of these things happened to be there, that started the cycle and the snowball effect that turned into what Silicon Valley is today. And it is still very powerful. But to answer your question, right, like why would we go seeking and building places elsewhere? And the truth is, we only have an office in Armenia. I mean, we're a global company and we're funded from American investors, but we only have an office in Armenia, and at least 30% of our team is based here. And the reason is that I myself grew up here. I was 19 when I got into college in the United States and moved over. And I always knew that there's a lot of talent here. And I also understand the overall market, the society. One of the things that holds back other entrepreneurs from going and seeking talent elsewhere is they don't understand other cultures, other societies. It's like a black box for them. And that black box is scary because they don't know what to expect, which gives people like me an opportunity to actually go look for talent in places where others aren't looking. I think that's the idea, right? Like majority of American-born entrepreneurs would never even think about like, oh, let's go hire someone in Armenia, because it sounds scary. They don't understand it. They don't know what it is that they're going to expect. And I think that gives an opportunity to kind of like beat the market to great people and build something that gives you an advantage.
I mean, Nvidia recently announced that they will open a research center. I believe they already have in Armenia. And some of the team was saying that a lot of the global IT companies may be apprehensive about moving to Armenia, but they're waiting for a different big company to make the move in order to follow suit. That's kind of the apprehension you're talking about, right?
It risks the opportunity, right? Because think about it, like if let's say you started a company today and I said, hey, let's go to Kenya and open an office, right? Kenya is something very foreign to you. It's something that you don't even know what to expect. What are people like? Is there even talent? I don't even know a single street in there. I can't even name a city probably, right? That unknown becomes this, oh my God, we could never do this. Now, once someone like a Codesignal or an Nvidia starts to do it, you're like, oh, well, they're doing it. So it must not be so scary anymore. So it starts to de-risk the opportunity, and people become way more open to taking that plunge. But however you look at it, right, I think the supply of talent is going to be the limiting factor, because Nvidia and many other large companies can come to Armenia, but if over the next few years they don't see that potential, they don't see that talent, they're not able to hire and staff and see success, they will eventually exit, and that can be way worse than them entering, right? Because entering and exiting sends a really, really bad signal. Obviously, we're all hoping they all come and enter and grow, but the bottleneck here is how much talent is there to go around? Which brings us back to the question of education, because education is what supplies talent. And I don't think we're thinking long-term enough about it, right? I think a lot of the times when we talk about economy and progress in Armenia, we focus on short-term, what can we do, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year? But I think we really got to think like 10 years, 20 years. And in 10 to 20 years time frame, you can actually start to think about like, how do we educate the future of this generation? So not only we can attract Nvidias and Apples and Googles, but we can give rise to companies that were started here and went public, right? And Israel is one of those countries that's been able to achieve this by becoming what people commonly refer to as an IT nation. I mean, they have so many companies that have been acquired for billions of dollars, were started there. And one of the things that they did, for example, is that everybody that goes to army, I mean, first of all, everybody, male, female, goes to the army, but they teach them programming. It's one of those very interesting ideas that like drives massive supply of technical talent and massive
during their service.
During service, I went to MIT with a woman who served in the army, and I asked her, "How are you so good at programming?" She said, "They taught me in the army." And I think I was like, wow, that's brilliant. So you're basically getting everybody to learn computer engineering, computer programming, and that leads to eventually the output that we're talking about. It takes years, but those are the kinds of investments that usually lead to outsized outputs.
And in terms of the talent pool, how much of it is about the local educational systems? You know, universities, the rectors, deans, and government ministers have been saying we're going to reform the university system. But how much also in 2022, how far does a university degree go? Is it such an absolute necessity? I mean, what do you think about that dynamic, the local educational system being the way to fix education?
Absolutely. Well, I'm way too contrarian in this respect because, well, first of all, the mission of the company that I've started is to help the world go beyond resumes. And going beyond resumes means to stop relying too much on traditional signals such as which university you went to, because it's a faulty signal, right? I don't know if I've ever told you the story, but like me and one of the co-founders of the company, Aram, we both grew up here during the 90s, during the, no heat, no electricity, and cutting firewood to get warm period. And I was in math Olympiads. I was doing a lot of international math contests, winning a lot of medals, and he was doing the same in programming, right? So we were like pretty much the best in math and programming. But I happened to go to an American school, to one of the top schools in the world. And when I graduated, I literally got chased by every recruiter in the country, from Google to every other one, versus Aram. They wouldn't even start to interview him, because even though he went to the best school here, right? He went to Yerevan State University, people would look at his resume and be like, I don't recognize that. You don't even get an interview. And that was like the genesis of starting the company, because he was, even after MIT and Google, he was the best programmer that I had ever worked with. And it was absurd to me that people wouldn't even consider his candidacy just purely because they didn't recognize the university. Now, I'm not saying education has no place, traditional education has no place. To me, the value of traditional education comes from environment, because we are social creatures. Humans find motivation in whatever is cool around them, right? Starting from a fairly young age. I mean, parents believe they have control. You usually have control up until they're like 8, maybe 7, because up to that point, you're the authority, whatever you encourage, whatever you consider to be important, they try to please you and they try to go in that direction. Once they're 4th and 5th grade, whatever their friends consider cool is what they do. And that environment shapes motivation. Where I'm going with this is everybody says, oh, you went to MIT, that must have been transformational. I barely attended the classes at MIT. I mean, but not saying it didn't change anything for me. What it changed is the environment that at MIT is very different. The environment is taking harder and harder classes is cool. It brings prestige. Doing more work, striving to achieve more, who has the higher GPA? Those are the things that are cool in that environment. And it becomes highly motivating to actually go do something. And I think if we're talking about changing the education system, I think it's not about, I mean, sure, instruction matters, quality of the teachers matters, content matters, those things matter. But what matters even more is, can we create an environment in which being great at math is cool? Right. If we can, I believe whether we change instruction or not, whether we bring in even better teachers or not, people will find a way. People are very creative, and these days education is so accessible. I mean, consider YouTube and learn anything. But you've got to have the motivation to do it, and I do believe a lot of the motivation, especially for young people, comes from what does my environment value and what does it not.
And finally, Tigran, I want to ask about science, research and development, which is connected to education. I mean, a lot of people will talk about what path you go down, what sphere in terms of education. Recently, Armenia launched its first state-owned satellite into space, but there were those that were saying Armenia is a small country, Armenia has limited resources, it has bigger problems, we shouldn't focus on things like science, research and development. What do you think about that argument? What do you think about that narrative?
Not to comment specifically on the satellite, because what's a great science and technology investment, what's not, is a sort of whole other question. But in terms of science and technology, it's been proven over and over again. I mean, if you go back to the history of Industrial Revolution, to what made United States, it's science and technology. I mean, obviously, sometimes you can venture too far in science and technology where applicability is like 50 years away. So that might be as applicable for a country that's looking for economic impact in the next 10, 20 years. But innovation, science and technology is ultimately what creates growth, what creates a world of abundance. Because what we don't realize is, it's not a zero-sum game, right? It's not like, for me to earn money, you have to lose money. No, there is a world in which we have abundance, but that abundance is created through science and technology, right? When we create machines that allow us to do more, far faster, to produce more, prices go down, things become more accessible, people start making more money, and the level of everybody's economic prosperity goes up. But that all of it is driven with science and technology. The issue is that there's usually a 10-year lag between the two. So people who think like, hey, I want to see immediate results, they're like, what is this going to do for us, right? But I think thinking long-term is one of the ideas that, like, countries, economies, these are things that don't change overnight. You can't. It's like living organisms, right? Like, you can't say like, hey, you're sick, here's a magic pill, it's going to all of a sudden make you better. No, like, it takes time, it's baby steps, and a plan that's far enough away where you can go through that journey and get there.
Well, Tigran, insightful as always. Thank you very much for your time.
I appreciate it.
And thank you for joining us on CivilNet.